This is hour two. Our number, 877-381-3811. 877-381-3811. You know when I think this book, The Liberty Amendments Restoring the American Republic, will be most important? When people can see that we're on the verge of collapse. But I want to try to avoid that. I want us to be informed now. Some of you may just find this intellectually stimulating and interesting and even compelling. But some of you may find it worthy of much more. You can draw your own conclusions. But I want to continue because there's information going out there that we don't know anything about this process. It's never been tried. This is all incorrect. The framers didn't invent this out of thin air. Matter of fact, just so you're a little more comfortable with this, Robert Nadelson, the professor of law retired from University of Montana, who I've been talking about, he points out a number of things. He says that this convention for proposing amendments, this convention of the states, was consciously modeled on federal conventions held during the century leading up to the Constitutional Convention, when states or colonies met together on average of about every 40 months. These conventions were, in essence, meetings of separate governments. And they had protocols. And he said each federal convention, that's what they're called, has been called to address one or more discrete, prescribed problems. Not general conventions. Hey, let's have a meeting and just discuss everything and anything. That's not what it is. And that's not what the Constitution created. How about how many delegates each state can send? Well, each state sends the number of delegates that the state chooses to send. So the state legislature decides. However, practice, back before even the Constitutional Convention, provides that each sovereign, or in this case each state, gets one vote. Now, also, the state decides not only on how to choose the delegates, the number of delegates, but the state has the power to withdraw delegates. The states also have the power, as you would imagine, in advance of talking about what kind of issues that they want to address at the convention to which they're sending delegates. This isn't all done in a vacuum. So there are subject matters. There are conventions for the purpose of proposing amendments about certain matters. Now, what about Congress's power? Well, we know from the Federalist Papers and from the words themselves in the Constitution, Congress has almost no power. Congress is, in essence, a secretary. It collects the applications, which are resolutions. If they cover materially the same issues, they set the initial date and time for the state convention. Congress has no further role whatsoever, period. And Congress doesn't choose the mode of ratification. The states do. So I just wanted to make this point. You can't have a runaway convention, as they say, unless the states are already in a runaway mode. Well, Mark, what if the delegates propose amendments that are just outrageous? Well, the states can withdraw the delegates. The states later don't even have to entertain the amendments because they're proposals, and they certainly don't have to ratify them, 3/4 of the states. So what is all this runaway stuff? The runaway stuff's occurring right now. So But, Mark, what about the Constitutional Convention? That was a runaway convention. It certainly was not. 10 of the 12 states that sent delegates, Rhode Island withheld hers, had authorized those delegates to propose an entirely new constitution. So it's not correct to say that that was a runaway convention. It certainly was not a runaway convention. And yet, we keep hearing this, and the states, in their state conventions, ratified the Constitution, what became the Constitution of the United States. If it had been a runaway convention where the state delegates were conducting themselves in some kind of rogue fashion, why in the hell would the states ratify them, the state conventions? They wouldn't have, would they? We know a lot about this process. And of course, I also start from the premise that this wouldn't even be necessary. My book, I wouldn't even have written the Liberty Amendments, but for the fact that the federal government is out of control, but for the fact that we're unmoored from the Constitution, but for the fact that we are in a financially unsustainable and constitutionally non-existent, in many respects, situation in this country, where tyranny is getting increasingly aggressive, soft tyranny. Like Obamacare. Obamacare is quintessential tyranny. The way it was passed by Congress, the way the Supreme Court amended the Constitution and rewrote the law, the way it's being imposed on us now with the President of the United States rewriting it, withholding certain sections, imposing certain sections. That law cannot sustain constitutional scrutiny, as most of these laws can't. The 3,000 laws the bureaucracy passes every single year, that doesn't withstand constitutional muster. There are ways to do these things, constitutional ways. You folks on the left, oh, what about the FDA? What about this? What about that? Well, go ahead and make your proposals. And if they're popular, submit them to the American people. Or have Congress, supermajorities, pass them, send them to the states to amend the Constitution. But you won't do it because you don't believe in the Constitution. And neither do many of the Republicans, who are nothing more than neo-statists. They don't either. Now, the difference is, ladies and gentlemen, in addition to raising all the issues, Obamacare, Dodd-Frank, and on and on and on, that your federal government is doing to you, and the hopelessness that it creates, and the inevitability that you feel of the destruction of the nation by this process, the difference is I'm pointing to our framers, the same men and women, well, men, the same men who constructed all the rest of the Constitution, who constructed this part of it too, for exactly the moment we're living in. For exactly the moment we're living in. What do you think James Madison would say today? Do you think he would defend what's going on in this country? Do you think any single man that was at that convention in 1787 would defend this? What do you think they'd be saying? Well, they might be doing something a lot more violent than I'm suggesting, but at a minimum they'd say, what the hell's wrong with you? It's in the Constitution. We put it there. We said why we put it there. Well, you know, this lady says this guy says this, they're worried about that. Worried about what? Don't you see the rise of tyranny in your country? You can't even pick your own doctor, your own health care system? You're going to lose your policy? You're going to lose your job, full-time job to a part-time job because the government tells you? They'd say, what the hell are you doing? And they'd be right. Well, we were told just elect more Republicans. Republicans, what are they? Well, they say they believe in free markets and the Constitution. Well, what have they done? Well, really nothing. Then what good are they? Then what good are they? We know a lot more about this convention process than people will admit. And let me suggest another thing to you. Do you believe in federalism? That is, do you believe in the heart and soul of the Constitution? The heart and soul of the Constitution is the manner in which the framers divided governing authority and what they left to whom. If the federal government was to be this powerful, why did they spell out the federal government's powers, the grants of powers, specifics about the grants of powers? Why did they divide this branch from that branch to the other branch? If the federal government was supposed to have this kind of power, why bother? Why bother having states at all? Why bother having a Bill of Rights? Since our federal officials, starting with the president on down, spend so much time scheming to evade them. And why have an amendment process at all? 2 of them. Why? If the Constitution doesn't matter. Because the courts can just change it. Or the president can do it by fiat, or Congress by legislation, or the bureaucracy by regulation. Why have this difficult process, 2 processes, for amending the Constitution, when it's the Constitution that we seek to evade? Why? And that's my prior book, Ameritopia. Why? Because the design that the statists have is not in the Constitution. Matter of fact, it defies the Constitution. It defies your heritage. It defies your principles. You cannot have this all-powerful central government and this entrenched ruling class telling you what to do in so many aspects of your life, important aspects and unimportant aspects. You can't have that kind of government and have a constitutional republic or a functioning constitution. They can't exist together. And so the statists for a century have succeeded. I hate to say it, but it's true, in destroying so much of what is in the Constitution and the relationship of the citizen to the government. They've done so much in destroying federalism and the nature of our republic. The entire purpose of the Liberty Amendments is really stated in the second part of the title, Restoring the American Republic. If somebody has a better idea than Madison and Hamilton and George Mason and the men who were in Philadelphia in 1787, if somebody has a better idea than the ratifiers who attended the state ratification conventions, if somebody has a better idea than that which is in the Constitution itself, you have an obligation to bring it forward now, right now, because we're running out of time.
Mark Levin.